Almost everyone talks about equality as though it's an obviously good thing, but to me it seems at best neutral and at worst dangerous. Equal means the same. If I say that 2 plus 2 equals 4, I'm saying that if I have two things and another two things, that's the same as having four things. Similarly, to say that people are equal is to say that they're the same. Do you really want to live in a world where everyone is identical? Now, you'd probably say that when you talk about equality, you don't mean it in quite that literal of a way, but it's not exactly clear what people do mean by it. So what I'll be doing today is going through 4 possible meanings of the word equality that people might support and explaining why none are worth supporting. Some say that believing in equality means you literally think that people are equal. But of course, people differ in intelligence, in strength, height, preferences, health, skills, etc. People differ individual to individual and group to group. As the great Thomas Sowell puts it, nobody is equal to anybody. Even the same man is not equal to himself on different days. A common response when I point this out is, but people are only different because of oppression, which is wrong to start with. There are a whole host of reasons that people can differ that aren't oppressive, including but not limited to upbringing, place of birth, genetics, or just plain luck. Just because one person is luckier than another doesn't mean the luckier person is oppressing the less lucky one. But either way, it's beside the point. The fact remains that people are different. Whatever the cause of the inequality, any suggestion of actual equality is simply a false claim about reality. An alternative could be that when you say you believe in equality, you don't mean that people actually are equal, rather you mean that people ought to be equal. But in what way is equality a good thing? Presumably nobody actually wants people to be all identical clones of one another. Perhaps instead what is meant is that we all ought to be equally well off. Let's take a simple example to see whether this kind of equality is actually a good thing. Consider 2 men, one rich and one poor. How much of the rich man's wealth would you be willing to destroy in order to lessen that inequality? I'm guessing most people's answer is none. I'm not asking you how much you would want to steal from the rich man and give to the poor man, mind you. I'm asking how much of the rich man's wealth would you be willing to destroy? If you are willing to steal from the rich man and give to the poor man, you may just think the poor man would value the wealth more than the rich man would. Possibly because you think the rich man has so much he won't notice a small percentage of his wealth gone, but the poor man would certainly notice the large percentage increase to his. What you're doing there is just trying to maximize total value for all involved, which is not the same thing as valuing equality. If you really think that equality in and of itself is a good thing, you must be willing to give up some cost in terms of total value in order to reduce that inequality, which is accomplished by destroying some of that rich man's wealth. If you're not willing to give up even a small amount of total value in order to reduce inequality, in what sense can you really claim to value equality? When I see that someone is not willing to pay any cost for something, I say that that person does not value that thing. Alternatively, consider yourself deciding which of 2 friends to give a spare concert ticket to. It's true that the relative wealth of the 2 people you're considering may play some role in determining who gets it, but more important will be the relative preferences of the 2 people. If it's a ticket to the wealthier friend's favorite band, while the other friend thinks that band is merely okay, you might decide it's better to give the wealthier friend the ticket, even though that will increase inequality. Again, the important thing appears to be maximizing total value, not equalizing value. It's only our tendency to value stuff less, the more of it we have, that makes equality seem like a good thing sometimes. That tendency creates predictable situations in which equality and total value agree. You might consider our hypothetical about stealing from the rich and giving to the poor to be such an example. However, when we consider situations in which total value and equality disagree, our hypothetical about the concert ticket, for example, total value wins, and therefore total value is what's actually important. That said, even stealing from the rich and giving to the poor in order to increase total value is a mistake. Consider the incredible improvements in the wealth of the average person over recent centuries. Ancient kings couldn't dream of the incredible bounty of exotic foods from all over the world now available to even the poorest among us in the local grocery store. Or the fantastical electronic devices that global markets are even making available in the third world at this point. All of this did not come from redistribution of wealth, but from the creation of wealth. People started businesses and worked hard to find ways to increase production because they were able to get wealthy doing it. And in the process, they made everyone wealthier. The extent to which you start redistributing the profits away from those productive people is the extent to which you destroy the very incentives that keep this glorious process going. It's important to note that I'm making this argument with one hand tied behind my back. I'm ignoring any other potential moral issues with stealing. What I'm pointing out is that even if you think there is nothing inherently wrong with theft, wealth redistribution in pursuit of equality ultimately reduces total value for everyone anyway, and so should still be opposed. However, if you really value equality, none of that would convince you to stop supporting such theft. Maybe for you, it's worth it for everyone to become poorer, so long as the poor only become a little poorer, whereas the rich become much poorer. At least then, people would be more equal. If you are one of these people, you're probably too far gone for me to reach with this article. Yours is the ideology that results in ridiculous hiring quotas where an organization will refuse to hire perfectly good applicants merely because they are of a race that is overrepresented, as though that matters. Yours is also the ideology that results in Pol Pot murdering everyone with reading glasses because people who can read seem like they might be upper class. However, the majority, who aren't monsters, would probably say that I'm talking about equality of outcome, whereas what they support is equality of opportunity. Let me introduce you to Professor Adam Swift. Swift is someone who actually takes equality of opportunity seriously. To that end, he is very concerned about whether we need to stop parents from taking care of their own children too well, lest they give their children an unfair advantage above other children. Quote from his interview with ABC. What we realized we needed was a way of thinking about what it was we wanted to allow parents to do for their children, and what it was that we didn't need to allow parents to do for their children, if allowing those activities would create unfairness for other people's children. End quote. As a result of this reasoning, Swift vehemently opposes parents' right to send their kids to a private school. Quote, private schooling cannot be justified by appeal to these familial relationship goods, he says. It's just not the case that in order for a family to realize these intimate, loving, authoritative, affectionate, love-based relationships, you need to be able to send your child to an elite private school, end quote. He isn't as extreme as he could be, though. Despite the fact that it confers an unfair advantage upon your children, he will still allow you to read to them, although you should occasionally feel guilty for doing so. Quote, I don't think parents reading their children bedtime stories should constantly have in their minds the way that they are unfairly disadvantaging other people's children, but I think that they should have that thought occasionally. End quote. It's worth noting here that reading to a child apparently has a larger effect on his future than sending him to a private school. Quote, the evidence shows that the difference between those who get bedtime stories and those who don't, the difference in their life chances, is bigger than the difference between those who get elite private schooling and those that don't. End quote. Remember, it is precisely because of this large benefit to your child that you should apparently feel guilty about reading to him. This is what even a moderate dedication to equality of opportunity actually looks like. If a child doesn't have parents who will read him bedtime stories, that is not something the child can get back. It's simply an opportunity that that child will never have. To head off a possible objection at the pass here, if you'd say that the solution to this inequality should not be to prevent some parents from reading to their kids, but to give other children the opportunity to be read to, then, well, you should recall our reasoning from the earlier discussion about equality of outcome. If you would never say that it's a good thing to reduce the net opportunities available to people in order to reduce inequality, then your position is indistinguishable from just someone who doesn't care at all about equality of opportunity, but just wants to give as many opportunities to as many children as possible. To drive that home, let's say I do something nice to give an additional opportunity to a child who already has more opportunities than the average child. Assume this is at no cost to any other child. If you really believe in equality of opportunity, you must be willing to say that I might have done something bad by improving a child's life. In fact, all of the same reasoning from equality of outcome really applies here, because as a particular clever internet rabbit puts it, opportunity is just outcome from a different reference point. Another objection that I've heard is that the education and upbringing you receive somehow doesn't count as opportunity. This is strange to me, because upbringing is a factor you have no control over that will affect whether you'll be considered for certain jobs. Isn't that a classic case of inequality of opportunity? Isn't that exactly how you describe the problem with basing your hiring decisions on race? It may be the case that compared to education, race is a less relevant factor to the ability to do the job, but that's sounding like more of a defense of meritocracy than of equality. Furthermore, even if you somehow make that leap from equal opportunity to meritocracy, it still seems like a hard thing to defend as a moral precept. The example that best drives this home is this. Is it okay for a father to hire his son at the family business? After all, that wouldn't be giving everyone an equal opportunity. That would be the employer hiring based on the employee's genetic connection to himself. Are you really willing to condemn the entire concept of a family business? Because if you're not, you don't really want equality of opportunity. Even those who see the problem with equality of opportunity still usually fall back on equality before the law or equal rights as a last-ditch effort to claim that they support equality. If this describes you, let me ask, do you support a one-world government? No? Well, then do you believe that it is wrong for the legal systems of different countries to have any differences between them? No. Well, then you don't believe in equality of legal rights. Different governments with different legal systems will protect different rights to different degrees. However, what if, like me, you believe the law should be privatized? Then you oppose the one world government and the national governments. You think that the law between you and I ought to be a contract that our rights enforcement agencies sign. This should deepen your opposition to equality of legal rights. Your and my rights enforcement agencies may have one contract with one another, while each may have a different contract with some third agency. Therefore, the law between you and me is different from the law between you and him. You may believe that there should be certain constants amongst these contracts. Perhaps all of them should protect some basic property rights, for example. However, what determines the punishment you have the right to inflict on someone for certain violations? What exactly constitutes fraud? How bright does your neighbour's porch light have to be before it violates your property rights? These are all questions that may have multiple valid answers, and if you believe in a market for law, you believe that it is acceptable, nay desirable, that we have a multitude of competing and coexisting ways of drawing these lines. Returning to the current governmental system, this is already true of international disputes. If you buy something from someone in another country, the laws governing that transaction will differ a little from laws governing an otherwise identical transaction with someone in the same country. One of the main reasons that I oppose government in general, and one of the main reasons I think that most people oppose a one-world government, is that we think that if there are multiple competing systems of law and people have some ability to choose between them, then there will be a selection pressure on those legal systems in the direction of producing desirable laws. In the market, that pressure is due to people switching companies to find the laws that they want to live with. In the international system, it's due to people switching countries to do the same. Neither of these selection pressures could exist if everyone in the world had the same legal rights. In short, we believe that unequal systems of legal rights will result in overall better systems of legal rights. I won't spend long on this last one, but I have even heard people say that equality means we should treat people equally despite their differences. When you point out that sometimes differences are relevant, for example, you shouldn't treat an innocent person and a criminal the same, they will add, oh, unless those differences are relevant, of course. Which might be the most pointless concept I have ever heard. Of course, only relevant differences should change your treatment of someone. That's pretty much what relevant means. You may as well say that you believe in the equality of all objects because you treat objects the same, unless it makes sense to treat them differently. Ridiculous. It's troubling that so many people put so much effort into finding strange new ways of being able to say that they believe in equality. It's like they aren't sure what it means, but they know that our society has decided it's good, and so they do these mental gymnastics to try to justify supporting it. Many of you will be right now thinking that you have some other, subtler concept of equality that you support. But at this point, I'd have to ask why you'd want to call it equality. Surely there is a better way of describing whatever it is you advocate for than a word that, if understood in the most straightforward of ways, is a defense for people who want you to feel guilty for reading to your kids. And even for those who want to kill anyone wealthy enough to afford reading glasses. Doing mental gymnastics to justify saying that you support equality is not a worthwhile pursuit. Even if you succeed, all you do is provide cover for those who have a much more sinister, yet much clearer idea of what they mean by equality. So, let us say what we mean. People are not equal, and there is no virtue in trying to make them that way. Instead of working to equalize the world, let us simply work on trying to improve it. Thanks for watching.